Good morning. I'm happy to see you all here. And today our topic is the benefits of joy. And I apologize for my voice. I'm a little low energy today, so I'm hoping that you can all hear me clearly. If you have questions throughout this presentation, please use the chat room to write them down. And then at a certain point, I will go in and look at questions, and I may ask you to unmute yourself so that we can talk about the question, or I may just answer the question. So feel free to write your questions in the chat. So the first thing that I'd like to say is I'm Kat Thompson. Hello. And my work is in emotional intelligence and evolution of emotion, and how emotion is a technology that can be used to manipulate reality. The basis of all of my work comes from the idea of co-creation. Co-creation is simply the understanding that everything that happens to you in your experience, you have some responsibility for. You never have more than 50% responsibility for anything that happens to you. There's always other people or situations that are co-creating with you. So you can't ever take full responsibility for something that happens to you. You do have to take some responsibility though. And I'll talk a little bit more about that as we go through today's topic. So the idea of co-creation is I'm responsible for everything that happens in my experience. Not everything I read about in the newspaper happens in my experience. Not everything I see on social media is happening in my experience unless I pull myself there. So I'm talking about what is happening to you in your own body, in your own experience, in your own life. Co-creation says there are two ways that you co-create. One is consciously, where you say, all right, I'd like to buy a new car. So here's what I'm going to do. I'm going to cut out pictures of the car I want, paste them on my vision board. I'm going to dream about that car. I'm going to make a plan for saving money for that car. And then when I have the money, I'm going to start looking for, that particular car. And if all goes well, I'll have myself a new car in 1 year. And that's conscious co-creation, okay? What I'm more interested in is unconscious co-creation. And what unconscious co-creation is it's when things are attracted to you to show you that you are holding belief systems that don't work for you. They're either outdated or they were never part of your soul journey, okay? And so what happens when we co-create unconsciously is that we create usually crisis events. And crisis events really don't come up unless we've been ignoring our little co-creative messages along the way. As your soul gets more impatient with you, it will increase the level of your co-creative crises until you are literally taken down sometimes and have to spend weeks in bed thinking about it. So I am really interested in the process of making what is unconscious conscious, because I think for myself, I believe that that is the true path to evolution. Spiritual evolution is the idea of bringing awareness to everything that's happening to you, that's going on in your life, that you are co-creating. And then as you have awareness, you become more powerful. You begin to have more, how do we say it? More revenue, more, emotional money in the bank, so to speak, to co-create bigger and bigger things. So I'd like to start this talk off today with the idea that I'm coming from this place of co-creation, meaning that there are no victims, okay? We currently live in a victim-victimizer reality, and that reality says black and white, left or right, good or bad, up and down, victim-victimizer. And so if something is not your fault, or if you don't take any responsibility for the co-creation, you are immediately in a victim-victimizer reality. And most of us have no power there. We have very little power there. And the purpose of anger is to tell you that you are in a victim-victimizer paradigm. Okay, so just a little side note on anger there. So we're going to move from a victim-victimizer reality to a full co-creation reality. That is what I think the evolutionary path for the human species is on right now, this minute, is, are we going to continue to operate out of victim victimizer, or are we going to go full-blown co-creator? And so today's topic, the benefits of joy, I'm going to take you to a co-creative power in a very strange way through addiction. Okay, so I'm going to start with, I looked up the dictionary description of joy, and here's what I found. The emotion of great delight or happiness caused by something exceptionally good or satisfying. Keen pleasure, elation. A source or cause of keen pleasure or delight. Something or someone greatly valued or appreciated. And I want you to really remember these words, greatly valued or appreciated. The expression or display of glad feeling, festive gaiety, and a state of happiness or felicity. Now, in a victim victimizer reality, you're taught to look outside of yourself for joy. So it's, you know, a new relationship, a new job, a new car, a new house, a new something outside of us is, and it can bring us temporary states of joy. There's no doubt about that, that if you co-create that new car, that car is going to bring you joy for sure, because you had some, you know, some responsibility in the bringing forth of it. However, I think that ultimately, during the COVID year, the last year that we were in lockdown a lot of the time, I spent a lot of time thinking about what is joy and what is happiness and what is contentment. And one of the things I noticed is that there's this very subtle social judgment that if there's too much suffering going on in the world, you don't deserve to be happy. You certainly don't deserve to be elated. And so I began to pay attention to that. And I saw that there were all these messages out there where there was this subtle and sometimes not so subtle shaming going on about, you know, people are being, are hurting and being oppressed, and you don't get to be happy when that's going on. So trying to operate as a joyful person within a structure that says, you know, if you're too happy, you're selfish. If you're too happy, clearly you don't care about others. If you're too happy, you're not paying attention, right? I started to really map all of those messages, because what else did I have to do, right? Just watch what was happening around me and look at the messages that were being posted on social media and what was the underlying energy behind them. And there was a tremendous amount of shame, if you were happy. And I thought that was very interesting, because we kind of are at this evolutionary point where we have the opportunity to really ascend into a higher state of being. And so it seemed really interesting that joy was being judged in this way. To be joyful while others are suffering is selfish. These are some of the messages. If I'm happy while others around me are suffering, then I must take pleasure in the pain of others. Or I'm just checked out, or I don't care about others. And then here's an interesting one that I hadn't really thought about. If joy is brought about by external forces, then I have a reason to be joyful while others are suffering, because this came to me as a gift. I didn't have anything to do with it, so I get to be joyful having it. But on the other hand, if I don't have any joy, that can also be externalized and say, well, I don't have any joy because the world is falling apart and I don't have a job and blah, 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 okay? So there's this two things at work here, the victim victimizer paradigm, and then what are the messages that are holding us back from stepping truly into a place of joy and contentment. And during this year of lockdown that we had, I found myself being actually quite content and being very nervous about it. It felt wrong to be content. It felt uncomfortable. I was uncomfortable. I was always looking for ways to break that comfort up, to break that contentment up, to make myself sad again. And so I spent a lot of time mapping that. So at a time when there appears to be more and more reasons not to be joyful, how do we find and nurture joy? And so I'd like to take a moment to talk about predatory capitalism. Predatory capitalism is the system of capitalism we have now that says, you know, capitalism, if capitalism is done correctly, it's a self-regulating system. You know, your goods and services find buyers based on, you know, your product having integrity, let's say, and your customer service having integrity, let's say. But predatory capitalism makes exceptions in all kinds of ways so that only those goods and services that are sanctioned by the people in power get to have a fighting chance, and everybody else does not. Predatory capitalism is reliant upon people being victims, and it's reliant on them being fragmented. And by fragmented, what I mean is you're not in joy, you're not happy. There's parts of you that are happy, but there's parts of you that are miserable. There's parts of you that you don't want to look at. There's parts of you you don't want anything to do with. Parts of you that you broke off from years ago and you don't ever want to think about them again. That's fragmentation. And when you're fragmented, you don't have a lot of personal power to create, okay? And so my work is really, for the last 25 years, has been how to put yourself back together in a way of power so that you are living in a state of joy and you are living in a state of contentment and peace. And that's what led me to the idea of addiction. So what is true joy? The ability to be at peace with all parts of yourself is what brings true joy, in my opinion. It's impossible for you if you like every part of yourself and you're content with how your day goes. If you get up and you're like, oh, I didn't really follow the plan today, but I did this, and or I didn't do anything and it feels just fine. I'm fine. I'll spend the day in bed reading. It's no big deal. It's easy to be content when you're not criticizing yourself, when you're not holding yourself to a standard that's almost impossible to maintain, okay? So, and we're a microcosm of what's going on in the world. So everything that's happening out there is happening in here. Every ecological disaster that's happening out there is happening in here. Every racial issue that's happening out there is happening in here. You can find it. And so the clue to healing all of this, of course, is to go within. We've been hearing this for 50 years. This is not a new idea in most spiritual traditions. You know, you go within, you know yourself, you find yourself, you work it out. We live in a time of such extreme distraction that it takes incredible commitment to find the time to go within. And so I'm hoping that today I can give you some quick little ways that you can use addiction as a map to follow to sacred joy. All right. Let me go to my next page. Okay. So addictions are built upon unconscious structures or habits. We build habits because it makes things efficient. A habit is a structure that allows us to act without consciousness. We can be unconscious. How many people have driven? Like it suddenly we're like, oh my God, the last 30 miles, I have no idea where I was, but I certainly wasn't paying attention. That's because we've driven enough that we've developed a habit where we can be somewhere else in our mind and our body just sort of takes over. So habits can be really good for us. And in fact, we put a lot of energy into building structures that will help us be more efficient. But sometimes we go a little bit too far and we rely on that habit too much. And then addiction is a habit. Addiction is a structure without consciousness, okay? And everybody has at least one major addiction and probably a few minor ones. I've met people who have said, you know, I have no addictions. And I'll go, yeah, you're kind of addicted to being right. And they'll stop and say, oh, I am, aren't I? So it doesn't have to be a substance. It can be an addiction to the need to be right, a need to look perfect, a need to be more woke than everybody else. And you see this on social media all the time. People are constantly fighting over the need to be right. And that's an addiction. There's an energy that gets exchanged that's feeding that habit, okay? So making an addiction conscious is a revolutionary act, because when you make an addiction conscious, you also make it sacred. So let's walk through, how would that look? Here's a trip to joy through addiction. All right, so remember at the very beginning in the definition of joy, it said greatly valued or appreciated. So I began to look at my own addictions, which were coming up. I don't know about you guys, but during that lockdown, holy mackerel, every addiction I ever had in my life suddenly came back. Even if I hadn't done them for 40, 50 years, they were back. And so I was like, oh, this is very overwhelming. I'm not sure I can do this. And so I had to really figure out a structure that I could address this in a way that was evolving for me, that I wasn't just grabbing, a cookie because the addiction of sugar would make me feel temporarily better. And then I didn't have to think about it again. Not to say that I didn't do that, I was doing that. But I also wanted to stop that unconscious cycle and bring some consciousness into it. So here's the series of steps that I came up with that was really helpful for me to walk through these addictions. One, and the first and foremost, is enjoy that addiction 100%. If you are going to do it, love it. Love it. Because most of our addictions are so tied up with shame and guilt and judgment that we do them, and that's why we don't want to think about them. That's why we don't want to be present while we're doing it, because it feels too awful. All those unnecessary feelings that are floating around, and they're saying, oh, here you are again. Oh, you're such a terrible person, whatever. If you enjoy your addiction 100%, it loses a lot of its power in terms of running your life, right? So as you become, as it becomes valued and appreciated, it tends to lose its power to pull you into the addiction. And instead you become now a partner with your addiction. So enjoy it fully. When you find yourself reaching for that cookie or that cigarette or that glass of wine or your phone or your tablet, bring your conscious awareness and pleasure to the action. And so, let's say you're addicted to a game on your tablet. So that game comes up, and instead of that little voice that goes, here you go again, you're wasting time, you're being addicted, you could be doing something else, you could be really productive. Instead of all of that, you go, wow, I love this game so much. You know why I love this game? Because it's hard enough that I don't win every time, but I do win enough that it allows me to feel like I'm smart or I've accomplished something. Now, that's in the bigger picture of, here's my life goals and I want to do this and this and this. That's not really in there. But it's an important reference point for your emotional body, that sensation of enjoying actually doing something that you can master over time. Okay, so think about that. That addiction is feeding you an energy of the ability to master something over time with commitment. You've made a commitment to that game. That's why you're able to win occasionally, because you've made a commitment to it and you understand how it works, and you just keep playing it and playing it and playing it and playing it. Okay. So when you choose to enjoy your addiction, you actually break shame away from it. Shame can't live there with joy. So it takes the shame out. And when it takes the shame out, there's a very different energy there. So allow yourself to appreciate the feelings that the addiction brings you. If when you smoke a cigarette, for example. So this was interesting. I was at a women's retreat with a woman who was a Native American elder. She had a ranch in Oklahoma. And I went to her, this was back in my early 40s, and I was kind of a heavy smoker. And I said to her, oh, I really want to quit smoking, but I just can't seem to stop. And she said, oh, that's easy. Just make every puff a prayer. She didn't mean that was easy to quit. She said it was easy to change the dynamic of it. Have you ever, if you are a smoker, making every puff a prayer is exhausting. Like I couldn't ever get more than 5 puffs out of my mouth without that's too hard, and putting the cigarette out. So there was a certain truth to that about when you bring awareness and something sacred into an addiction, it actually changes the addiction and it no longer has control over you. Okay, so, if you're having a cigarette or you're having a glass of wine or whatever it is you're doing, bring your joy into it. Appreciate it and value it. Appreciate it and value it. It has something for you, or you wouldn't be doing it. All right, the next thing. So first and foremost, I made myself enjoy my addiction, sugar addiction. And that took a long time. I mean, I didn't feel like I was ready for the next step for a while because it was very, very intense and overwhelming. And it took a long time for me just to even get to the point where I could go through that with a little bit of awareness. And then as my awareness increased, then I was able to go, okay, what's the next step? So the next step was then, what are the patterns? Look for the patterns. What's the environment that triggers the need for this addiction? Or what is an event? Or what is a memory? And what I found was there was always something that made me feel insecure. And when I felt insecure, the first thing I wanted was sugar. So then I had to look and say, why was I feeling secure? Well, one day it was because I said something mean to somebody. And one day it was because I didn't follow through on a commitment I had made. And one day it was because, what else? There was a bunch of things. Oh, because I didn't work through most of that lockdown, I kind of lost my sense of who I was. And so that made me uncomfortable and nervous and insecure. And so I was like, why am I here? I don't know why I'm here. What am I doing here? What's this all about? Blah, blah, blah. And then, of course, that made me want to go to sugar. So sugar became my go-to when I was feeling insecure about something. And if I tracked it back, some of the things I could do something about. If I was mean to somebody, then I could call them up and say, you know what, I have to apologize. If I bailed out on a commitment that I made, I could call them up and apologize and, maybe recommit. If I was feeling insecure because I didn't know who I was or where I was going or what my life was for, then I could meditate or journal or do something to work through that. What I found was the most helpful through this whole experience was the ancestor altar. You might be able to see it in the back there. I went to the ancestor altar constantly with my journal and would pick one of my ancestors and I'd say, dear Mary, I'm really having some trouble with this. Could you help me? And then I just start writing and writing and writing. And this has been my relationship with the ancestors for a long time, that as I write, they give me information. And as I'm writing, I can always tell when the information's coming from them and it's no longer about me, it's answers. It's things that they're giving me, understandings or advice or something. So when I would find the patterns, if I didn't feel up to addressing them with a real person, I would go to my journal and I would write that person a letter. And at some point then in the future, I had the strength and the courage to be able to address them in person. Because what happens for me is when I'm in those places of addiction that come from insecurity, I have very little courage. It's challenging for me to pick up the phone or, and call somebody and say, I have to apologize. That's always been a challenge for me. And it's something that I'm continually working on. So sometimes if I don't have the courage at that moment, if I write it down, it changes something within me. And then I do have the courage at a later date to call that person. Okay, so look for the patterns. And then what is it that's triggering the desire? What is triggering the desire for the addiction? And that may take you a while, and that's okay. If you have to keep doing whatever your addiction is, until you figure it out, then just do it with great pleasure and joy. All right. The third thing was allow the addiction to show you its higher form. So that was something that came from my ancestors. I was like, what are you talking about? And they explained it to me. They show me I get these downloads, and it's kind of like a movie. I get this whole image that has everything in it. So they said, okay, for example, let's say that somebody has an addiction to pot. And the reason they love smoking pot is when they smoke pot, not only do they relax, but their brain starts to think in a different way, right? This is something that most of the people I know who smoke pot will say, yeah, your brain changes and you see things in it, your perspective changes, right? And so the ancestors said, so if you're smoking pot to change your perception, and that's all you're doing, then that's an addiction. But if you use that perception change and you take action from that, so for example, let's say you have a blog or you write a newsletter or you just have the ability to get into conversations with people that are evolving conversations. So conversations that are about evolving instead of conversations that are bitching about something or gossiping. That's using the addiction for its higher purpose, which is to take that perspective and bring it out into the world, however you want to do that. And then I was like, okay, could you give me an example that's a little closer to home? They said, all right, let's take brownies. So then I got this whole story, and it was like a picture of me in the grocery store and seeing a package of brownies. Now I can't buy brownies because I'm gluten-free, but it was a good, when I could buy brownies, I would definitely do that. I would buy the brownies, and in the back of my head, there was a voice going, you know, those aren't good for you. They're going to make you sick. Why are you buying these? Put them back, right? But I shut that off. So I was really unconscious. I picked them up. I put them in my cart because I knew that I would have a time where I would really want sugar. And if it wasn't in the house, it was just too complicated not to have it in the house, right? So I put it in the cart, brought it home. Then I get this feeling of unease. I don't think about it or try to follow it or anything. I'm still really deeply unconscious, but I get this feeling of unease, and then I eat the brownie, and then I eat another brownie. And it's not satisfying to me. So I eat another brownie, and pretty soon the whole pack of brownies is gone. And now I'm sick. Now I'm really sick. And that whole pack of brownies and me being sick makes me unable to follow through on some commitment I made the next day. And so as I got that vision, I started thinking back about how many times I had committed to something that made me nervous or made me anxious, and I didn't want to do it, but I didn't know how to say no. And so then the sugar became the perfect excuse. I wasn't feeling well. I couldn't follow through on my commitment, blah, blah, blah. So now that I saw that, and on top of feeling just sick from sugar, I was sick from shame, and I was sick from guilt. And I had so much self-hatred because here I went again, and I did this terrible thing that's bad for my body, and it's bad for me, and I don't understand why, and blah, 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 blah. So then I was like, all right, let's go through this as a conscious addiction. How would that look? So I'm at the grocery store, I see the pack of brownies, I pick them up, and then I stop. I ask myself, why do I need to buy these? And then I remember when I don't have sugar in the house, it makes me anxious. And I often go out just to buy something sweet. So I decide that I'm going to buy them. I reverently buy them. I reverently place them in my cart. And as I'm doing that, I'm imagining how they taste in my mouth, like the whole gooey chocolate taste, right? I'm imagining that I'm letting my body have that experience of feeling that. And I will tell you, I did this recently, and I had to put them back because the idea of eating them made me kind of ill in the store. So it wasn't brownies, but it was something else. It made me kind of ill thinking about it. So I was actually able to put them back. But let's just say that I didn't. I reverently put them in my cart. I take them home. I'm at home. All of a sudden, I'm like, I got to have some sugar. All right, why? Why do you need sugar right now? What's going on? So then I have to stop, and that's when I have to face my feelings. And that's always been the most challenging part for me, is facing those feelings. What are they? Where are they coming from? It's like this massive insects, inside that, once you open it up, they're just all going to come pouring out. And so a lot of times the addiction is a way to just keep those things in there. I don't know why I'm feeling this way. I'm just feeling this way. So it's like, all right, if you don't know, you don't get to have a brownie till you know. So get your journal out. So then I get my journal out, and I have this great worksheet, which is on my website. You're free to download it for free at any time. And it's just a very simple worksheet that's like my fear says, my anger says, my grief says, my guilt says, my shame says, and I just go through, what does it all say? My guilt says and maybe I don't feel any guilt. Maybe I don't, but maybe I'm feeling terrified. And one day I was doing this exercise, and I found myself writing, I feel terror at being happy. And I was like, whoa, there it is. There it is. Now I get to go back and figure out why. But it took me weeks of writing, and I finally got to the bottom point of, I feel terror about being too happy. And so that's a whole piece of work for me to do now. But that's what came out of this exercise, right? I started to journal because I didn't really know why I was being drawn to eat the sugar. And that's what came out after weeks of stream of consciousness journaling about my feelings. It could be other things. Maybe you have an assignment that's due and you don't feel like you're going to be able to get it done. Maybe you don't know how you're going to pay your bills next month. It could be any number of things that are triggering you for this addiction. The point is, the addiction has a message for you, and it is a sacred path somewhere. So change your perception about your addictions, and the addictions themselves will change. Okay, next thing I did is I've learned that if you make anything, if you create a ceremony for something, you immediately raise the energy of it. It becomes a sacred event, okay? So now I create a sacred ceremony around my brownie or my cookie or whatever my sugar is. I acknowledge the triggers, I acknowledge the feelings around it. I take one brownie, not 6, and I find a beautiful plate. And then maybe I take it up to my ancestor altar. I put it on the altar and I thank my ancestors for helping me to understand where I'm at and ask them to bless my brownie. And then when I eat my brownie, and this, for me, this is absolutely the hardest part, to be fully conscious with every single part of eating it, biting it, tasting it the whole time I'm chewing it, tasting as it goes down. I have a very hard time. It's just like with cigarettes. I couldn't get through 5 puffs because it wasn't, the brownie or the cigarette or whatever the thing is, was just a place card for something else. It was really the whole ritual of going into the process with pleasure, finding the patterns, following them back, getting the understanding, and then creating a sacred event around it. That was where all the juice was. That's what I was looking for. I wasn't really looking for the sugar, but the sugar helped me find a way to get there. So when I eat the brownie or the sugar, whatever it is, and I keep my full awareness on every aspect of eating it, and I enjoy it, I'm bringing in reverence, and what was the other one? Reverence and value and appreciation. So I'm appreciating everything about the process. I'm appreciating the brownie or the cigarette or whatever the addiction is. I'm appreciating that for helping me go onto this path. And I'm no longer at war with myself around addiction. And as I'm no longer at war with myself, I become content. And so that was what the process was. I started the process during this lockdown around addiction. And after about a year of doing this, when I got to a place where I was really content quite often, that's when I found the terror of being too happy. And so now that's the next level of work for me, is to understand why I have that fear and how to address it. So this is my this is my journey using addiction as a way to find your joy. I'm not saying that it would work for, or I'm not saying it's the path for you. I'm suggesting that if there is a problem for you with any sort of an addiction, you could try some of these steps and see if that helps, see if that changes things, see if that moves you into a different kind of an evolutionary space. And remember that as a co-creator, you have tremendous power when you're aware of how you are creating something unconsciously. When you understand that, you now have conscious awareness, which is much, much more powerful for creating. And we need to really quickly, I think, on this planet, step into conscious creation. And that means we cannot deny the parts of ourselves that we have shut down and said are not, these are not me. Every single one of us has everything that's wrong in the world out there. We have it in here. We can heal it in here first, which is the only way that we can really impact the bigger world. Some people are addicted to making change outside of themselves. They don't feel good about themselves unless they're out there doing something to make change. We need people doing things out there to make change as well, and to bring awareness. But there are many, many people who aren't interested in that, don't have the energy for it, don't have the resources to do it, but they could do all of those things within by looking within and finding, where is the part of me that, you know, is racist? Where is the part of me that is an arrogant oligarch? You know, where's the part of me that feels entitled? Like, we all have all of that, because we are a microcosm of the macrocosm. So everything that's happening out there is happening in here. If we're upset about pollution and the draining of the you know, the Earth's resources, how are we doing that to ourselves? How are we draining our resources for a lifestyle that maybe is killing us and doesn't provide us with joy, or doesn't provide us with community and connection? You know, this whole lockdown thing really was an opportunity for us to look and say, you know what, this lifestyle we're living is crazy and it's not working. And it doesn't bring out the best in us. What lifestyle would bring out the best in us? How would that look? So I sent out a newsletter last year sometime called something about 2040, Greetings from 2040. That's not what it was called, but that's what I'm calling it. And so throughout the lockdown, I kept pulling that newsletter out and I kept adding to it. So it was, the idea was that it was a letter from myself in 2040 to myself today, or in 2020, saying things are looking, you know, very grim, and I know you're freaking out. I just want to tell you what it's looking like on my end. So I got this sort of image of 2040 that I wanted to be in, and I kept it very, I didn't say how I got there, how we got there. I just said, here's what we're doing. And so I pull that out every week and I add to it. I write, I get more detail. Now I'm starting to get like, how did we make the switch from this to this? Now I'm starting to get that kind of information so I can add to that. And I'm finding that I pulled myself off social media and I started doing this 2040 newsletter instead. And all of a sudden, I started getting the most incredible articles in my email box about, you know, these innovative ways that people had of regenerating the earth and correcting and making changes. And it got me excited. And then that got me thinking more about how things could look. And I think we need to spend a lot more of our energy imagining what it could be instead of fighting what it is. Because this is how predatory capitalism keeps you locked in and keeps feeding on you, is it keeps you in fear, it keeps you in doubt, it keeps you in addiction, keeps you fragmented and out of community. And then all that energy is being harvested to keep the status quo going. So I'm saying, be a revolutionary, pull yourself out of that and say, you know what, I'm not going to participate anymore. I'm not going to participate in fear anymore. I'm going to spend at least part of my day, every day, dreaming about the kind of world that I could live in. And if you are stuck, go online and look for some, you know, Google people who are writing about this stuff. It's all over the place. There's so many incredible minds out there who have already visioned pieces of a new world. And we just have to believe in them and start pulling them together and make our own dream. All right. I don't see a single question. Does anybody have any questions? If you have a question, you can unmute yourself and just ask. Otherwise, I do have a little bit of a meditation that I'd like to do with you. But before we do that, there's a virtual offering basket. You'll see the button on the chat screen. If you haven't opened your chat screen, at the bottom of your Zoom page, there's a thing called chat. And if you click on it, it should open a chat up on the right-hand side. And there's a link to the virtual offering basket. And I encourage you to make an offering. We all know that the Lake Harriet Spiritual Community has held magnificent space in this area for us to really bring in a lot of evolutionary energy. It's one of the reasons why I love living here. After traveling all over the world, I come here and the energy here is delicious. It's innovative. People are interested and engaged, and we're doing our work. My friend in California said to me long ago, in California, we talk about it. In Minnesota, you guys do it. And I was like, yes, we do. So know that your offering is also helping to keep the space open and alive so that we can continue to come together and really walk through this evolutionary space we're in with great consciousness and joy. All right. So the offering is there. So now what I'm going to have you do is I'm going to have you close your eyes. We're just going to do a little meditation. Close your eyes, and there's a tube that runs from the top of your head, through the top of your head actually, up to the sun, and down through the perineum into the center of the earth. And so visualize that tube. It is exactly the size of your thumb and your middle finger together. So it's about the size of a little bit bigger than a fluorescent light bulb tube. And it goes from the fontanella up and from the perineum down. You're going to feel the energy from Mother Earth coming up from the bottom and flooding your body. And the sun coming down from the top of the tube and flooding your body. And breathe.
I, who am the beauty of the green earth and the white moon among the stars and the mysteries of the waters, I call upon your soul to arise and come unto me. For I am the soul of nature that gives life to the universe. From me all things proceed, and unto me they must return. Let my worship be in the heart that rejoices, for behold, all acts of love and pleasure are my rituals. Let there be beauty, strength, power and compassion, honor and humility, mirth and reverence within you. And you who seek to know me, know that your seeking and yearning will avail you not unless you know the mystery. For if that which you seek you find not within yourself, you will never find it without. For behold, I have been with you from the beginning, and I am that which is attained at the end of desire.
Okay, let's take a deep breath in and blow out any stale thoughts or stale beliefs or out of time judgments that no longer suit you that may have come up during this session today. If you'd like a copy of today's notes, you can send me an email. I put my email address in the chat box. So I would like to reiterate that nature is our healer. We are part of nature. We are nature. Everything that's happening in the natural world is happening with us. So allow nature to be your healer. It's spring here in Minnesota. Many of us are just getting out into the dirt and putting our hands in the ground, and we'll be getting healed a great deal that way. I just saw the most interesting article today of I think it was in Russia, somewhere over there. These beekeepers, the woman had fallen and had a terrible accident, and her back was really hurting her. And one day she was out working near the bees, and she was in so much pain, she just leaned up against the beehive. And after sitting there for 5 or 10 minutes, all of her pain was gone, and she felt really good. So she mentioned it to her husband, and they ended up building a bed on top of the beehives. And you have to lay directly on the wood that the bees are under, because it's their vibration and their heat, and they can sleep in there like 9 months out of the year. They can sleep in there, and the whole family's been doing it, and they have no illnesses, no pain, nothing. And I was like, oh, that is so excellent. So you see how there's all these really amazing, innovative, I won't even say innovative, because this is old technology. This is ancestral technology, but a lot of the ancestral technology is starting to be brought back into our awareness. And there's ways that we can become healthy and strong and coherent human beings by simply going to nature and allowing her to be our partner and helping us to reach our full potential here on this planet. All right. Oh, that was very nice. Thank you, Patty.
I have a question.
Yes, Christy, did you have a question?
Yeah, you're talking about co-creating, and I was wondering, like, I struggle with mental illness. Am I co-creating that?
Well, okay, that's a big topic, so I'm going to ask you a specific question. Do you have a in one sentence, tell me what you understand your mental illness to be?
Mostly depression and anxiety.
Okay, depression and anxiety. Thank you. And thank you for sharing. That's very brave. I know how frightening it can be to share in a public forum. Depression and anxiety come when we are living in a victim reality because we have no power. I have struggled with suicide depression since I was a child. My first suicide attempt was at 11 years old. And I never medicated. I never went to the doctor for it. I instead used it as a tool for understanding where it came from. And I understand that when I am in depression, it's because I feel powerless. So then I begin to look to see, okay, where have I given my power of belief away? Where have I given my power of action away? Where have I given my power or turned it over to somebody else, or don't believe that I have the power to do something, or have something, or believe something? So what I would say is that that's a message from your body and your soul, really, saying you have to get out of this victimizer reality because it's not working for you. I also wanted to mention that my book is still available for sale for those of you who would like to really get the whole book about how to move to a co-creative reality, how to use your emotional body to become a co-creator. The book is on my website. It's for sale. It's $20. And it's really a map of, here's how you take your 5 master emotions and you use them to get to be a co-creator. So what I would say to you is, educate yourself about the difference between a victim-victimizer reality and a co-creator reality. That's the first thing, so that you have a very clear understanding. And then begin every single day to look at where you can consciously co-create with somebody or something or nature, or you can co-create something, and begin to practice. It's just like that game I was talking about on your tablet. If you practice co-creation and you have like a 10% success rate, that's enough to get you excited about, okay, I'm going to keep doing this. I'm going to keep doing this. Does that answer your question?
I think so. Yeah,
Okay.
thank you.
You're welcome. Anybody else have any questions? Okay, it's been a pleasure. This was really fun. I never know how these are going to go because I didn't honestly write this. I've been taking notes on this for a while, but I didn't actually put it all together till early this morning. So some days I never really know. And boy, did I want some sugar yesterday because I'm like, you don't have it done. And I was like, but I'm not feeling well. So I called my ancestors this morning. I was like, I need some help. I need to be strong for this, and I need to have a really good, solid presentation. And I would like something that everybody who's listening can take away, something that they need. So I hope that that has happened for you. I hope that that's a true thing. And it was a pleasure speaking today, and I hope that I see you all in the future.